Welcome back to the Strumming Doctor, where we are going to separate out the challenge of upstroke strumming in this lesson. And I think this is a problem for most guitar players, because when we first start playing guitar, we grab a guitar, and what's the first thing we do? We hit a downstroke, right? So I think our downstrokes end up being disproportionately developed compared to our upstrokes. And if you take some time and just focus on upstrokes, you can really do a lot and go a long way in clearing that up. But the cool thing about this is all of the tips, most of the tips that were important for getting your downstroke technique good and polished, apply to the upstrokes. But there are three really important aspects of upstroke strumming that I want to emphasize to you after we go over all those initial tips on upstroke strumming. So far, or before we get into this, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to go to guitarfam.com and create your complimentary account, because you'll be able to go through the entire first module on the site for free, and that's the only place you can go through and watch the practice sessions for each one of these lessons, so make sure to do that. Another thing that I want to make sure you're aware of before we get into this is just that if you go to guitarfam.com/songs, there are a load of popular cover songs that you can go through, and there's one section called Easy Songs, and there are a bunch of great songs there that are very easy to get into and just apply everything we've been working on as far as strumming, so you can have something musical to show for all the work you're putting through. I'll mention more of those in details, like specific songs that are good to work on as we go along, and then after we get out kind of toward the end of module 1, you'll see. So we're going to separate the challenge here again by not even worrying about our fretting hands, so just mute the strings, and we're only going to work on upstrokes. And all of the same tips apply here that apply for downstrokes, but again, there are three that I want to emphasize that will help you with your upstrokes in particular. So make sure to stay relaxed. That's the first thing. Nice loose grip on the pick, or light grip on the pick. Don't death grip it. That'll make it really hard to get that upstroke through the strings. If I loosen the grip on the pick can give and flex, like this, and glide through the strings. So make sure to keep a light grip on the pick, keep a relaxed motion. Play softer, like a moderate to softer volume on the guitar. That'll help. Make sure to think about that honey and feather analogy, that flicking motion. And when you do that, you end up going this way and then coming back this way. So it ends up being kind of like a pendulum, like this, a rotational pendulum, if you will. But same exact thing, only with upstrokes, right? So it's the other side of the strumming coin, as it were. Keep a relaxed grip enough grip on the pick to where it doesn't fly out of your fingers, but it's loose enough to where it glides through the strings. For your pick grip, just be aware of that again. So you can have just a normal relaxed pick grip with your thumb and index finger. You can have two fingers on there, or you can use the second finger to just kind of support that first finger and kind of nudge that pick back in place when it starts to slide around. Also, think about your pick angle. Are you downward like this, or parallel, or up? It's going to, an upstroke like this, pointed up, with your pick angled upward, is going to feel a lot different than parallel or pointed down. So just be aware of that. Try that natural pick grip with just your index finger and your thumb, or you can support the pick with your middle finger to kind of nudge it back in place when it starts to slide around a little, or you can do the whole two-finger thing. Try not to dig too much of the pick into the strings. Actually look back at your strumming hand when you're doing this and check out what's actually going on, because you may be thinking you're doing all of these things, but the real story will be if you video yourself, or if you actually look back to see what's going on. Be like, oh, I didn't realize that I had so much of the pick sticking out, or that I was digging so much of the pick into the strings, right? Don't use just your elbow like this. That can make it really hard to keep up at faster tempos, and you can get tired after a while, so make sure you get that rotation on there. Okay, and think about your fingers. Like, how were you tucking your fingers, or were you letting them kind of relax out here when you're doing downstrokes? It should be relatively the same when you're doing upstrokes. Right? Okay, so those are all the tips that we went over for your downstrokes, only we're applying them to upstrokes. And a big one here is that, well, let me get into the three main things that I told you were specifically helpful for upstrokes. The first one is lighten your grip on your pick. This one's even more critical for upstrokes, because if you have I'm just going to grip it moderately. It makes it really tough for the pick to get through the strings and give and glide, right? So if you have even a moderate to heavy grip, you see here how it's really, I'm really digging into the strings hard, and it forces the strings to get really clanky too. So lighten the grip on the pick, and as soon as you lighten the grip on the pick, instead of just being rigid like this when it's the strings, it gives and glides through, and then gives this way and glides through, gives, glides, just like that. Okay, so think about that. That's the first thing of 3 that make upstrokes a lot easier for you, is to make sure you have that loose grip on the pick, man. Second thing that's really key for upstrokes is to not dig too much of the pick into the strings, because that's kind of the same effect as holding onto the pick tightly. If you have a lot of the pick sticking out and you have a lot of the pick hitting the strings, it's just going to be almost impossible to get it through the strings. So make sure you only have enough of the pick hitting the strings as necessary to make the strings ring out at an appropriate volume. You don't use any more than you have to. Keep a light grip on the pick. Okay, the last tip for these 3 upstroke specific tips is, and this is a new one, you don't have to hit all 6 strings when you're doing upstrokes. Even if you're using a chord like a G that uses all 6 strings, you don't have to hit all 6 strings on your upstrokes. Generally, like if I'm playing a G chord or an E chord, I'm only hitting the top or the high 3 to 5 strings. Usually it's around a 3 or 4. Sometimes I hit 5. Sometimes I might hit all 6, but you don't have to. I think I'm getting to the D string on that. I'm not hitting the A string. Sometimes I'll hit the A string like there, and then sometimes I'll hit the low E string. The better your technique gets for strumming in general, the easier it'll be to hit all 6 if you want to, but you don't need to at first. So just keep that in mind as you work on your strumming technique. You don't have to hit all 6 strings with your upstroke like that. You can just go. And that's exactly how you want to practice this. Just go as slow as you need to think about all these tips. How much of the pick you're digging into the strings. If you're staying relaxed, are you just locking your wrist and using your elbow? You don't want that. Keeping a nice light grip on the pick. Only hitting the top 3 to 5 strings, or the skinniest 3 to 5 strings. Okay, this is a new physical coordination. So just like with the downstrokes that we went over, give yourself 2 or 3 weeks to work on this until you start really absorbing all the tips and finding out and experimenting with what you like and with what works for you. Give yourself 2 or 3 weeks until you evaluate yourself and be like, you know, I'm starting to feel it. It's starting to feel pretty good. Don't work on it for a couple of days and be like, oh, I'm frustrated. I can't get it. It doesn't feel right. Give yourself a little more time with that. 2 or 3 weeks, really patiently with this. Don't worry about a metronome right now. Just go through to upstrokes as slow as you need to really think about all these different aspects of strumming technique. And then start to speed it up a little bit here and there. And see, and just be really careful. Does your technique change? Do you start to grip the pick too tight and get stiff and strum from your elbow? If so, when you speed up, stop, start over, speed up again, and make sure that technique stays pretty much the same for, you know, moderate tempos all the way down to slow tempos. And if you want to video yourself, that's going to be really good. That'll give you the real story of what's going on with your strumming hand. Because you're going to need to program this in. Basically what you're doing right now is you're programming the computer that is your brain, or your brain that is a computer, on how to strum with upstrokes. All of these things are really important, like the light pick grip, angling down so it glides through, only hitting the top 3 to 5 strings, keeping that rotational movement there, all important for upstrokes. Okay, watch this video as many times as you need to in order to absorb all of these tips in the context of upstrokes. And if you have any questions, email us support@guitarfam.com. Go to guitarfam.com, create your free complimentary account. That way you can go through the practice session for this lesson coming up in the next video. You can only get that on the site. And if you need to, if you feel like you're just stuck on something, go to the site, schedule a personal private one-on-one lesson with me. The first one's complimentary, so there's no risk. See you in the next video.